What a day, 3rd of June 2023. It's absolutely beautiful. It's been like this for about 3 weeks now, so we haven't had rain for 4 weeks. I'm going to talk about these things, spuds. You know, in Britain, there's about 6 million tonnes of potatoes grown every year. It's incredible. Now, potatoes fall into 4 categories: first early, second early, main crop, and late cropping. And all those categories do is they designate the growing period for the particular potato. So first earlies have the shortest growing time, second earlies stretched out a few more weeks, main crop a few weeks more. Late cropping potatoes are the sort of spuds that you would put in the ground in late June, July, and you would leave them to grow on in summer to get a crop in October later in the year. Now, potatoes, they'll grow just about anywhere. You know, people grow them in tyres, in buckets, or all over the place. But to get a really nice crop of potatoes, they need moisture. They need rich, humerus ground, plenty of moisture in the ground for nice big tubers. Now, the tubers on potatoes start to swell up after flowering. So after the potato flowers, the tubers are already set at that point, and as the flowers die back, the tubers start to swell, and that's when potatoes need, I guess, the most moisture. Once your potatoes, the foliage starts to sort of yellow off and starts to heave down and fall over, you're not at that point going to get much more growth in your spud, because effectively the top growth is dying back. So whatever size your potatoes are at that point, that's pretty much what you're going to get. Now, when it comes to first earlies, second earlies, you're better to harvest your potatoes as they come ready, because they don't really store very well, first and second earlies. They have a thinner skin potato as opposed to main crop, which can grow like a thicker skin, if you like. And with main crop potatoes, after the tops die back, you want to leave them in the ground at least 4 weeks just for the skins to thicken up properly, because they store better then. I like to store my main crop potatoes in the ground for as long as I can, so hopefully avoiding frost. If the weather is really wet and bad, I shall possibly pull them up, because I don't want the potatoes rotting in the ground. You've also got to watch out for pests if you store in the ground, so say rats, mice, slugs will dig down, they'll find them, they'll eat them, so always be aware of that. What I do, I cut the haulms off the top with my main crop potatoes, and then I'll sheet them over, and then I'll sort of dig them as I need them, because I just think they store so much better in the ground. But if it's going to be frosty, it's going to be a hard frost, it's going to be a lot of rain, then at that point I will probably take them up and put them in bags or in boxes. You want to inspect your potatoes. If you're trying to keep them for storage, you want to inspect them and make sure that none are damaged and they're all beautiful and intact, no cuts or marks on them. Do not wash them when you've harvested them. Leave them on the surface to dry or in a shed to dry, and then store them like that. Now we've got a helicopter. This is the joys of filming outside. You just cannot control the environment, can you? Now I'll put the cropping times there, so you can see it and maybe take notes from that if you want to do that, of the first, second, third earlies and late cropping potatoes. Just make a note of them, because that growth period, like 14-16 weeks I think it is for first earlies, that's the time that from planting they will take to crop. The same with second earlies, main crop and late cropping. But they're all about 14-16 weeks. I think main crops stretch out to about 22-24 weeks, and they're quite healthy for you actually. You know, they've got a lot of vitamin C. I think it's more vitamin C than a glass of, say, tomato juice. They've got higher in potassium than bananas. They're full of fibre. They're probably healthiest eaten with the skins on, but I just love them boiled, mashed, for chips, roasted, everything. You know, I'm sure everyone does. So in order to grow big, nice big potatoes, which kind of we all want really, you need a lot of moisture in the soil. The problem with moisture as the season progresses into July, August, September is that when soil temperatures get above 10 degrees, the potatoes are very susceptible to blight then because of all the moisture in the ground at night. So the blight fungal spores will be wafting around everywhere, and if your potatoes are wet, your leaves, your stems are wet, they will attach to them. And within days, literally within days, the blight can destroy your entire crop. Now, you can Google blight, pictures of blight, the leaves turn yellow, they curl up, they go black, and it happens really quickly. And if that happens, you want to cut down the entire crop and harvest them as soon as you can, because if the blight gets into the potatoes, it will utterly destroy them. It just turns them rotten and they stink. And you don't want the blight spores getting too far into the soil either, because, you know, when summer comes around next year, the blight spores will just set off. It's probably a bigger problem on allotments really like this, because you've got a lot of different people growing potatoes, and some, you know, may be infested with blight, and it will travel across the allotment rather quickly. So for that reason, you're better planting your potatoes as early as you can in the year, February, March if you can. The trouble with planting early is you've got to watch frosts. Frost will just decimate your potato as they come through the soil. They won't kill your spud, but they'll knock it back weeks, because all them little haulms that are coming through the ground will be burnt by the frost. They will die back, and the potato itself will have to put new haulms up then. So you can get away with it. I had on my first early crop, which is the one right in front of you, I planted those in March, I think, towards the end of March, and we did have 3 nights of frost just as they came through. And all I did, I scraped the loose compost on the surface around the haulms, and I put some old dust sheets and blankets on top of them. I think I did the 3 beds actually, because they were all sort of within a 2 and 3 week period, these potatoes. And the frost came and went, and I lifted the sheets off, and they were absolutely fine and not a problem. So the thicker the material you can put on your potato tops, you know, the more protection you've got. Like fleece doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really protect potatoes against frost or fleece, so that's why I use like a thicker blanket. Now the soil on this plot was sort of decimated when I came on it. Over 12-15 years it's just been, you know, there's been no organic matter put into it. So people have come on cropping things, digging the soil over, breaking up the structure. It's drying out, maybe added nitrates in order to grow things like grow more and things like that. All it's done, it's destroyed the soil structure. There's no organic matter left in the soil, it's all completely dried out. These are the borders on the sides of the allotment, and so far these borders have not had any organic matter put on them in the last 12 months. So this is pretty much what the soil was like 12 months ago. It's literally just dust. There's only moisture here because these borders are watered 2 or 3, 4, even 4, 5 times a week, because we've got little plants growing in here just to bring in some pollinators and friendly fire to help pollinate the ground and bring predators in to help combat pests. So I'm constantly watering this, and I've got to try and keep it as wet as I can, because when you do water it, the water just runs off, it's so dry. The microbiome in the soil is virtually non-existent. There's no worm activity, so, you know, once you do that, you're really lessening your chance of growing anything on the plot, or well, you can probably grow it, but you won't get a very good harvest. And when I came onto this plot the year before, that would be 2021, potatoes were planted on here, and they grew, but they produced nothing bigger than a pigeon egg, I believe. And the weed came up faster than the potatoes did. The plot was absolutely covered, sort of this height, in grasses, in docks, in nettles, in bindweed, in every kind of weed that you can think of. And when I looked at the soil, and I was told about, you know, of many people, that this plot just does not produce food. It's notorious for being really bad ground. But I knew that I could improve this soil, because since the 1980s I've been using permaculture methods to grow food. I had friends in the 80s who were very knowledgeable on it, and it really, you know, it resonated with me, and I started using that method to grow food. It's called no dig now, and Charles Dowden has really made it very popular and brought it to people's attention. And permaculture simply means working with nature, not digging the soil, not disturbing the ground, and just adding organic matter, like happens in nature, in the wild. Because nature doesn't dig the soil over in order to grow things. Organic matter falls onto the ground, the worms and everything else, the bacteria, the microbes, the fungus in the soil just eat that organic matter and draw it down and enrich the soil. You can't beat nature for that sort of thing. And because the soil has got a great structure, it retains moisture. So much so that these potatoes, as I said, it's not rained for 4 weeks. These potatoes have not need to be watered. And if I reach down now into the ground, sort of 3 inches down, it's lovely and moist. It really is. You can just see the difference. Look how wet that is. And this hasn't had any water for 4 weeks, believe it or not. It's beautiful and moist. It's got a good structure like that. The surface is dry, yes, but this is compost, from last year, that was put on last year, and it's kind of protecting the moisture. It's keeping the moisture in the soil, because when you've got a dry layer on the surface, it stops the moisture underneath wicking to the surface, so it kind of creates this barrier. Also, so when you're watering all the time and you're just wetting the surface, it allows the moisture deeper in the ground to just come to the surface, because it just travels through it like a wick. So this is another reason why no dig ground is so wonderful. All the beds have been dressed with charcoal like this, activated charcoal, so that charcoal is in the ground underneath all this topsoil, and that holds so much moisture and so many nutrients that again, that locks moisture in the ground. I will do a video at some point on making activated charcoal. It's really easy to make, really easy. You don't need anything fancy to do it. I'm not too concerned about any blight coming along, because we're into June now and the temperatures are really coming up. I'll show you what the soil was like on the plot when I came down, because the borders here, they haven't been composted yet. The main beds on the plot have had about a foot of compost put on them, and that's coming in the form of rotted horse manure. Compost I have made by building 3 hot bins, which matter down really quickly. They also sterilise it from weed seed and any kind of bacterial and fungal diseases that are in the stuff that you put in there. So you can literally compost anything. And so I was frantically round the site all year, picking up windfall apples, cutting nettles down, cutting comfrey down, asking people to give me the weeds that they were weeding. I was bringing stuff from home, I was composting it down, and I produced 3 cubic metres of compost last year, which again went back onto the soil. And as a result of that, the soil has got a beautiful structure now. And going forward, I'm just using permaculture on the whole site, so we're not digging it, we're not tilling it, we're not doing anything. The only thing I do is I periodically feed in the soil with liquid feed. So I make comfrey feed, I make nettle feed, and I make a mixture of vegetable feed. So as I'm pruning and cutting things back, cabbages, potato tops, anything on the site, all carrot thinnings, onions, anything, they all go into a barrel, it all gets rotted down, and it stinks, but it's a great all-round fertiliser, liquid feed for the soil. You feed in the microbiome in the soil all the time. You want that happy and healthy. You want it really invigorated to give the plants the nutrients they need. Also, without that organic matter in the soil, you've got very little worm activity, and worms are so important to the ground. Like, do you know that in good, rich organic ground, every hectare the worms can produce 100 kilograms of nitrogen in that soil, which is kind of twice as much nitrogen as most crops will need to grow. It's just incredible. I'm going to do a compilation video shortly about the allotments and the journey I've taken over the last 12 months with this site, going from a total and unbelievable mess to what you see now. And I've got a kind of working period of 2 or 3 years before I get this soil to where I think, it should be. this is year one, so this is the first year that I've had a mixture of crops going on the ground, and so far I'm really loving it, but I just know next year is going to be better, and the year after will probably be the ultimate after progressive and successive applications of manure and these roots getting into the ground and breaking up the soil structure and the worm activity thriving. Yesterday I noticed that there was one of the first early potatoes, which are the Swift in front of you. They're about 2 to 3 weeks off being ready still, but I noticed one of the plants was starting to go yellow and it was falling over. I suspected it was probably a mole, so yesterday I took that plant up and had a dig down, and indeed there was a big tunnel coming from the depths of hell right up into the middle of the potato. So it had eaten and scratched all the roots away, obviously looking for worms and grubs or whatever, and as a result of that, that plant terminated growth probably about a week ago, something like that. So I harvested it, as you can see in this video. I got some nice tubers. I then pulled another plant up in comparison just to see what that was like, and the tubers on that one were slightly bigger. So I'm hoping in 2 weeks that those first earlies will be ready and I'll be able to start digging them and harvesting them. And as I say, I don't store first earlies at all. They're a salad potato, they're a new potato. You eat them as they come ready and use them, preferably within a couple of days, because that's how they taste at their absolute best. Beautiful and fresh, straight from the soil. Second earlies, they probably store a little bit longer, but again the same applies to them. If you can eat them straight out of the soil, as with all potatoes, but as I said before, main crop are your storing potatoes, all the main crops. So many varieties, there's no point me even trying to list them. I'll give you a walk round now and I'll tell you what sort of varieties I've got. So here in this is the third bed from you. These are second earlies. The bed is split in half there. These are Estima, and then we've got Maris Bard on the end. And I've been growing Maris Bard potatoes for about 40 years now. In the bed here, so this bed we've got a second early potato up to there called Charlotte, and these are like a nice salad potato, and they grow really nice big tubers. This one is one of my absolute favourite potatoes, and it's Ulster Prince. I couldn't really get seed this year, so I only put half a bed in, but I will be saving all my own potato seed this year and using it next year to grow on. And the first bed is called Swift. A lot of people don't understand that you can save potatoes and grow them again next year. A lot of people think you've got to buy seed potatoes, magical seed potatoes, that are somehow superior to just bagged potatoes that you buy. It's not the case. All seed potatoes are just potatoes that you buy from the supermarket, or you buy from your organic shop, or that you grow yourself. And ideally they want to be about the size of a duck egg. And you just want to, if you're harvesting like I will be this year, you want to save those potatoes, as many as you're going to need for the following year, and just keep them in dry, cool storage over winter, and they'll start to chit and sprit in about March the year after. And growing your own potatoes from seed is the best way, is the best start your potatoes can get, because those buds have been grown in your own ground, they're used to these local conditions, and you'll get a much better crop off them. So going forward now, I won't be buying any more seed potatoes unless I try a new variety. I've got 7 at the moment. My Maris Piper potatoes are at the back of the plot. I'll put a clip of them in. They're the last potatoes I planted, and that was in May, middle of May I think. But I've also got 6 potatoes in buckets, which a friend gave me, a variety I've never grown called La Norma. He says they just make the best jacket potatoes, so we're growing 6 of them in buckets because I had no ground left to grow them. I'm also doing a trial on them potatoes on this electroculture fad, which is meant to be the best thing since sliced bread. More on that. I've got a video I've already doing on that. If you want to watch the start of that, it's here. I'll put a link there. So I've got these wacky copper coils and things all over the allotment, and I'm going to update that in the next 2 weeks, because that will have had a month. That will be trial in a month. Can kind of see a difference in the bucket potatoes, so I'll bring you in and show you that. I've decided, guys, I'm going to do another potato reveal. So I'm going to dig up this swift potato that's on the end of the bed. I've already I took these two out yesterday and I filmed them, but the one with the mole was here on the end, the mole damage one. But I'm just going to pull this. The only reason is I'm going to put some lima beans on the end of this bed and grow them up canes. So if I take this out now, my lima beans are almost ready, and it means I can get some more organic matter in the ground here. Give it about a week to settle in, then I can put my lima beans in, up some frames. So I'll pull this one. Let's show you what I'm getting from my first earlies. As I say, it's still about 2 weeks from being ready. Right, let's get this up and have a look, eh? As I said, these potatoes are still 2 weeks from being ready. 2 to 3 weeks actually. So they've still got 2 or 3 weeks of growing in them, these things. And once potatoes have flowered, that's when they really start to put the weight on the tubers. That's when the tubers really start to get bigger in size. I think that's it. Possibly that's it. I can't find the actual seed tuber. It will be in there somewhere. But look at that soil. Look at that soil. Is that a slug? No, that's the old tuber there. Kind of rotted away, little bits of it there. That soil is just beautiful for potatoes. They love growing in it. Yeah, that's about it, I think. Again, because it's no dig, I'm not digging the ground over. I'm just minimal disturbance. That is it. Another one. Minimal disturbance to get these potatoes out. And you've maybe noticed that these potatoes aren't earthed up at all, so they're not hilled up. I simply plant them. So that would have been the depth I planted these potatoes back in March. That's what they've produced. They've not pushed themselves out the ground. They're not green. And I think you'll agree, those are really nice for new potatoes. Look at them. They are so clean. They really are. There's no scab on them. There's absolutely no damage. That is a beautiful plate of potatoes for tea tonight. Wonderful. There we go. Just have a go at growing potatoes. You can just grow them anywhere. Just take note of the things I've said and happy growing. So this is me signing out. Thanks for watching. Give it a thumb if you got anything from it, and many thanks to my patrons who support the channel. And I will see you quite soon in probably an electroculture update and a few other bits and bobs that I'd like to talk about. Okay guys, see you later.